Welcome, Antoine. We've
you.
had, I think, a very interesting discussion just now.
Yeah.
Very practical, in a sense, a sort of development bank, asset manager, a corporate. Obviously, the group BNP covers many parts of the financial system. Core banking, you have asset management, and so on. So what does this theme of just transition really mean for you at BNP?
Well, first of all, thank you, Nick, and hello, everyone. First of all, I believe that just transition has to be a fast transition, because the problems we are faced to and the climate urgence is an important urgence, and we certainly do a lot all together, but we have to do more, and certainly it has to be fair, it has to be just, but it has also to be fast. That's the first point. But it's a transition. We are in a world which is a carbonated world that has been built over the last 200 years by everybody. It has been encouraged by the government. It has been built by the corporates. It has been financed by the banks, and it has been acquired, bought by the consumers. So we have to move all together, and it's very important to have this collective move. For example, in France, we have Entreprises pour l'Environnement, who has made a scenario on how France could be carbon neutral by 2050, with efforts from everybody, with efforts from the corporates, from the banks, from the government, and of course from the citizens. So this is an example. To a certain extent, at BNP Paribas, we are in one of the first company where the person who is in charge of the transition is at the executive committee, because we want to have a complete vision of what it means, not only in terms of environment, but also in terms of social aspect. For example, we have decided to put the 17 SDGs inside our corporate purpose, and to measure which is a part of our credits that directly serve the SDGs, and we are already at 168 billion euros. But yes, at the end of the day, we know that we have environment problem with climate, but also not to forget biodiversity. We have an increase of individual inequalities, which is a huge problem, and we have an increase of territorial imbalances, and the just transition is a transition that will have a complete vision of all those aspects.
Thanks, Antoine. It's very helpful, I think, is sort of seeing that as the environmental, the individual inequalities, and then this spatial dimension, the territorial, which I think we heard on the last panel. Obviously, there's a lot of expectation in society about the performance of banks. Could we go down a little bit more detail and get a sense of actually the commitments and the actions that you've been taking to deliver your climate strategy?
Yes, of course. What is very interesting is that banks have come quite early of the conversation, and they are now accelerating very fast, and particularly the banks in France. We started to have environmental policies almost 10 years ago, but there was a real acceleration after the Paris Agreement in December 2015. And what is interesting is that since the important decisions have been taken in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, or 18, it's now that you can really see the impact. And I must say that more generally, the French banking sector is extremely advanced, and it's probably, along with the Dutch banking sector, the only one which has really implemented a real shift, a real transition, a real move. And I have an evidence of this move. When you see in 2018, you have not a single project finance on coal that in the world that has been launched with a French bank in it. Not a single one. And the French banking sector is the only sector who can say this, probably with the Dutch banking sector, but which has a smaller international footprint. But so that's the point. But at the same time, if you take the 10 largest banks for project finance in renewable energy, you will find the 4 largest banks, the largest French banks in it. So what is really important is that now we have really entered into the shift, into the real transition.
And we were talking earlier about some of the dimensions of this, what it means actually in the bank. In terms of, tell me a bit more about the sort of the people dimension. You were talking a lot about actually that how does this play out in terms of people?
Yeah,
That's what we've heard in terms of just transition, but within the bank as well.
Yeah, within the bank as well. First of all, what is important at the moment, if we want to make a transition, we need to make a transformation within the bank. For us, for the society, it's a transition issue. But for us, in the bank, it's a transformation issue. So if we want to make a transformation issue, we have to watch closely what we have to transform. A bank, it is mainly people, money or figures, or money and figures, and computers. And the transformation process has to be run by or for people, figures, and computers. If you take the people, for example, at BNP Paribas, we have clearly seen that if we want to make an energy transition with the large corporates, with the energy sector, but with other corporates, we absolutely need to train the people and to do a massive training effort to change the mindsets, but also to change the skills. And for example, from the 2018 and going to mid 2019 to mid 2020, we will have 600 client-facing senior bankers or senior people in some areas like risk that will follow a very high-level course in Cambridge to be really able to not only to change their mindsets, but also to advise clients on energy transition. We also have done seminars to identify the new business model linked to energy transition. We are really doing it as a cultural transformation and a skill transformation process. Another thing is that I believe it doesn't apply only to banks. It applies to everybody. If I would be a government, I'm not, fortunately for me, but if I would be part of a government, the first thing I would do is certainly to implement a massive training program everywhere in the schools, in the universities, in professional upskilling on energy transition to make sure that everybody in the country not only believes it is important, but has at his own level the skills that will allow to change the things. You know that even in small in SMEs, people are now starting to tell that they don't have the skills to implement energy transition. And on a personal level, for example, I mentor a very small business in my country of origin, which is teaching energy transition to people in the country. And it's obvious that they are an incredible success just because the need is enormous. So it's very important that we are doing these things for people. After, we have the figures. So clearly, what is being done by Natixis on the side of their balance sheet, what we are doing at BNP Paribas with ING, with SocGen, BBVA, and Stanchart, with the Katowice pledge, is absolutely essential. We need to be able to put this transition within our accountancy. It's not exactly accountancy, but it is something which has to be as rigorous and as serious, and we really need it. We need to create the standards. We are in the Belt and Road initiative because it is also very much about creating and spreading standards. We need to be able to have the right figures, and it's very important. And finally, the computers, they are important both in flagging all that has a connection with transition, in integrating database within. For example, for the moment, nobody, almost maybe except in the Netherlands, nobody has really taken the challenge seriously of financing, of doing a real modern financing for energy efficiency of housing. If we want to do this, we need a database, but we need also automated system to connect the database to what we do, and we need also to work with the fintechs. So we need to put this also. We need to put this in the people, in the figures, and in the computers.
The transition will be digitized. So we've talked a lot about, I think, the core bank, but also the group is a major investor. I mean, I know the work on just transition in the asset management division. Can you give us a little sense of sort of some of the practical actions being taken as an investor that BNP is taking?
Oh, you know, we have an asset management arm and we have a life insurance arm, and both of them are working on a very determined. They are on a very determined path. What is important for them is obviously the way they choose their investments, and they have taken very strong stances of divestment, for example, for fossil fuel, but they are also working to improve their impact investing, and they have put also the social aspect at a very important place in what they are doing. And what is also very interesting, and we are proud of it, is to see that a survey has been done to see who really supports the climate-friendly resolutions in the general meetings of shareholders, and BNP Paribas Asset Management appears to be the second best in the world for supporting climate action resolutions.
Thank you. I think along with the other panelists we had earlier from EDF and Caisse d'Dépôt and also ABP, I get a sense that this is the will is there, the desire to make the transitions there. Actually, some of the practice is there, but is it enough? We have a timeline for this. As you said, when your opening remarks, it has to be fast. What do we really need to scale this up? We can't wait for a sort of slow evolutionary development.
You know, at one moment, it's about climate governance. For example, at BNP Paribas, a lot of people have been doing groundbreaking things for several years. And our CSR has been extremely advanced in doing things that are really forward-looking. But at one moment, we went further when our CEO says, okay, it's important in our governance, and it is something that we will make a group effort. But this group effort that some corporates or some banks are doing, it has to be done on a larger scale. At one moment, we need to have a strengthened climate governance at the level of the governments. At the level, at one moment, we need to have guys who says, okay, let's see what are the problems. We have problems with climate, we have problems with biodiversity, we have certainly, for example, we can see we had a lot of mentions of the intrication between social and climate issues. There is one area which is absolutely an example of this, is agriculture. For the last 50 years, after the Second World War, agriculture was nowhere. The program of development of the countries was urbanization and agriculture. Well, it was somewhere, but it was everybody was saying, okay, this year it's 15% of the GDP, next year it will be 10%, and it was 10% of the GDP. It's ridiculous. It's not 10% of the GDP. Everybody is eating thanks to agriculture. So agriculture is at the center of our lives. It's absolutely essential. So, and now we also discover that these things which is absolutely essential in our lives is also really important in an important factor in greenhouse gas emission, but it's also instrumental in carbon sequestration, and that it is there we have the largest social problems. If you take everywhere in the world, I have been in several countries, in Andhra Pradesh, in India, in a lot of countries, in France, of course, also, but not only in France. Everywhere you can see that there are huge problems for agriculture, and at one moment we need to have governance that take the problems one by one and that empowers the rest of the society and organize the discussion starting from the problems. And this is what we need, but obviously there is also a growing awareness of this in all I would say, a large part of the governance. What was said by Dr. Majun this morning shows how the thing it is seen like this in China, it is seen like this in France, and we can see that it's less obvious, but in the reality of the American ground, a lot of people in the institutions are trying to do the same also.
Antoine, I'm really glad you finished with that focus on agriculture and rural communities. That's a signal we're getting a lot, that when people think about just transition, they think very narrowly, immediately coal. This is the whole economy, and actually the rural economy is actually where some of the sort of upside opportunities for job creation, for rural revitalization, community, I think this could be very strong. So thank you for bringing that dimension in. Thank you for your words. I've now got 3 words with the letter F in my mind, which aren't rude words. It needs to be fair, the transition, it needs to be fast, and it needs finance. So Antoine Cyr, thank you very much.
Thank you.